Knockback, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Knockback. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan, Jawsome Moriarty. Dagan, it's good to be here with you today, my friend. How are you? Haven't said that in a while.
Kyle.
Yeah.
Here's to swimming with bow-legged women.
Yeah. That guy was kind of nuts. How's it going, my friend? How's life? How's everything in your world?
Yeah, everything's good. Everything's going pretty swimmingly this week. No complaints so far. Kyle, I'm very excited.
Yeah.
I got something for you. Total surprise. We didn't talk about this before the show.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Guess what we're bringing back, Kyle?
What's
We're
that?
going to try it. Maybe it's a one-time thing. Maybe not.
What's that?
We're going to do a little opening segment.
Oh, interesting. You're feeling yourself right now. Okay, good. Okay.
I think this is going to be fun.
Okay.
This is something I thought of over the holidays. Just kind of randomly came to me, and I said, you know what? This would be nice for Knockback. I'm going to do this with Kyle when we get rolling and get in 2024. So, Kyle, this is a little game I'm calling Wanted, Dead or Alive. Very simple. All you have to do, I'm going to tell you a famous celebrity. You're going to tell me if they're still alive.
Okay.
Or if they have gone the way of the dodo.
I'm always surprised by who's alive and who's dead when I look it up. So that's interesting. Yeah.
And this list, I hope, will be a little ambiguous. Like, I purposely chose these 15 people to be maybe a little hard to know. Maybe somebody we haven't thought about in a long time, but they're still ticking. But are they? I don't know. And we'll see how you do.
Interesting.
Okay?
Yeah, because sometimes I'm like, oh, that guy, didn't I just see that guy in a movie recently? And then it's like he died 1999 or something. I'm like, oh my God, how did I not know that? You know? Just Christ, it's horrible.
And what can I tell you about this list? Okay.
By the way, Dig, I should say before you get into it,
sure.
Just to remind, because we have a lot of newer listeners, we used to do opening segments when it was an audio only podcast, when we record right in that room. That's funny. I don't know if we ever mentioned that. The room Dagan's in is the room we used to record all of the big audio podcasts in. When I come visit him, and then he would come visit me in Santa Monica. So this harkens back to those heady audio only days. I love calling old things heady. Like, because I'm not really even sure exactly what that means, like what you're trying to say, you know?
But it's heady.
It's nostalgic. Like, you're thinking about it. That's what I think about is heady, you know? Yeah. Okay, good.
I like, though, that, for posterity, that this is indeed the same room. And then, of course, we had the West Coast chapter as well. But this was the East Coast room where we did all that.
And that was the couch I used to sit on, the bang couch right there.
That's it over there. That's the one.
Yeah.
It's too small for me, but I lay on it every night and watch movies. All right, my friend. So, okay, I can't go in the order I have them listed here. I got to jump around. But I want to start with this one for sure, because this is a meaningful one for me. Kyle, Diana Ross, is she still with us?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay, Kyle, Marlon Brando.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to put this here. Cross that out. Okay. Kyle, Francis Ford Coppola.
Oh. No.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah, you're in a certain area here, I can see.
Right? These are designed to be tougher.
Yeah.
We'll see if that's working for you.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, Kyle. Our very own, we'll be talking about him today at some point. Roy Scheider. Is he still alive?
Yes.
Okay.
He looked like he was 75 in Jaws, but he wasn't.
They didn't age well back then.
No.
I don't know. It was the hard drinking, the cigarette. I don't know.
Dude, I see some things sometimes in some old pictures and stuff where I'm like, whoa. Actually, I was reading about Jefferson Davis, the Confederate president. He married his second wife, Verena, was 18 when he married her, and he was 38 or something like that. And I looked at their wedding picture and I'm like, he looks like he's fucking 80. Are you kidding? Like, I got to send you this picture. You like earnestly, I'd be like, how old do you think this guy is? And you'd be like, he's probably like 65. No, like, no, he's 38. Anyway,
there was something about hitting 30 back then. It was just like a hard hit. Like all of a sudden you went from 29 to like 65.
You have to assume, though, that these guys' faces never saw like 1 ounce of, Lubriderm or something that would have really helped a lot.
Cocoa butter.
Yeah, exactly. Like they never did cocoa butter touch Jefferson Davis's body. Never.
Never that. All right, let's see. Let me jump around here. Okay, Kyle. Stevie Nicks. She's still around.
Yes, it was the other one that died, I think. Right?
Okay.
The other girl and the female.
Yeah, that's my God, why do I always forget her name? Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks.
Micah? Oh, never mind. I thought you were in the next room. She would know because she loves her.
We will look it up.
Yeah, I'll look it up. I'm just going to look it up.
This is not the first time I've forgotten her name on the show.
It is past members. Christine McVie or McVie.
Yeah, McVie. Shout out McVie. Yeah, she died relatively
recently, I think, right? In the last year or two. Because I got to admit this. Like, when I'm sorry, I'm interrupting your thing, but do you know when you feel? I've talked about this before with latitude and longitude. It's like my favorite example. When I was dead ass graduated with an American history degree from a tier 1 university, where we're studying maps and troop movements or whatever, and graduated thinking longitude and latitude were the other things, like the other way around. I don't know how that happened. Because I was like, oh yeah, longitude, long around like this. And they're like, no.
Right. No, that's the opposite.
Yeah, it's this way. And I'm like, what? I think I was 32 years old when I discovered this or whatever. So anyway, I bring that up because in Fleetwood Mac, I was like, they had a second female singer.
Oh my God.
I had no idea that she was, there was another, I just didn't know that. And I don't know how the fuck I didn't know that, but I didn't know that. And I think it might have been obscured by being like, oh yeah, you think there might be a second woman because Lindsey Buckingham, who's kicked out of Fleetwood Mac as far as I know, but that's a man.
Yes.
So I don't know if that's where it got mixed up, but when she died, I discovered, and she's like, no, she sings these specific songs. I was like, I didn't know that. Not that I'm a huge Fleetwood Mac person. I'm not, but.
No, anyway, I can see someone your generation. I was sitting there in the 70s into the early 80s with mom and dad's vinyls with the liner notes. Of course I was going to know. I saw everything. Had those things in my hand, Yeah, but that
was what was so cool about records.
Oh my God.
Was just the huge liners, And some of the famous liners like Sgt. Pepper and everything, where they had all these inserts and this cool shit to play with.
Yeah, it was a package.
Mm-hmm. Right. Buying a special edition game. Now you buy video games and there's nothing in them.
Oh, it's so sad.
Sometimes it's just a code in the case. It's like, why'd you even do this?
It's so sad.
What? All right, go on.
You kids don't even know. All right. I feel like I'm proud of these because these are tough ones, man.
Did I get any?
Even know all these
I must have gotten some wrong so far, right?
You've gotten some wrong so far.
Yeah, I would assume so. I'm positive about the Diana Ross one, but I'm actually unsure about every other one that I've said so far. Yeah.
Yeah, and these were designed to be hard. I didn't even know them all when I came up with the names. And I could give you one hint. It's almost 50-50 the way this shakes out.
Okay.
All right. Kyle, Frank Oz.
He died.
Jim Henson bit the dust.
Oh, yeah. No, that's true. You're right. That's what I'm thinking. Jim Henson. Yeah. No, Frank Oz is alive. He's alive.
Okay.
Yes, you saved me there. Because I was like, Yoda, that dead.
Yoda and Bert. Come on, you got to know these things. All right, Kyle. Oh, I feel like this is a really hard one, and I just heard one of my favorite podcasters talking about this person recently. Carol Burnett.
Oh. She's alive, I think. Very old.
Okay.
Comedian. That one hasn't. That title hasn't aged well. I don't mind it, but I tell Micah she's one of only 4 funny women I've ever known or encountered in my entire life. So Carol Burnett's probably another one. Think about it. I'm not trying to be sexist, but think about it. Do you know many very funny women? Can you even
personally in my life?
Do you know someone that Micah legitimately is mega funny, and she's really the only person, except maybe my friend in college, Abby, who I was like, you're funny. Okay. There's something about women don't, in my experience, maybe it's when you're younger, they don't want to be. Someone actually explained this to me once. It's they don't want to be clowned or clowning. They're very prim and proper. It stops them from being funny. So it's you would think there would be a bunch of Lucille Balls, fucking crazy funny people like that,
That's a great example.
Or I still watch I Love Lucy and laugh to this day. I'm like, this is fucking awesome.
Oh my God, she was genius.
But Micah's up in that list. She's up there with Lisa. She's up there with Lisa Lampanelli, who I think is another one. I love her.
She's great. She's great.
Who else?
In our life,
yeah.
I think about this all the time. It's one of the reasons why we lament why she won't come on any of the shows. It's our sister Dana. Our sister Dana has such a dry, sharp wit about her, and she's not always in a humorous mood, but she's naturally
no, she isn't.
No, but she makes me laugh maybe more so than any other woman in my life does, just because of her genuinely Dana takes. And I think a little bit of that Long Island, New York attitude that we talk about a lot, that just kind of plugs into comedy or laughing at things, sarcasm.
Dude, but the thing about Dana and Allie is that I never know, less so Allie, but like I never know. It's dangerous to joke around Dana because like something funny can suddenly become very serious. You know, like that's the thing about.
I don't know, really.
It's like, yeah, like I feel like maybe it's just because I feel like she's always mad at me for some reason.
Sure.
But it's like like I don't know why, but it's like I feel like I can't get that deep with her anymore because I feel like because of the mixed company all the time, she has to aim towards the lowest common denominator. Like if something is funny, she has to act like it's not, or that it's inappropriate, or like, how could you possibly say that because Dash is around or something like that, or like her son or whatever. It's like,
sure.
And I'm like, you know, because like when I think about people like Uncle Mike, like relentlessly funny people.
Yes.
I don't think I know a single woman like that except for Micah, to be honest.
Great
like
example.
In my own life. But then I think about what was the chick from Strangers with Candy, like really funny ass people like that.
Amy
or
Sedaris,
right? Or people that were in like the 90s comedian females on SNL were like all Molly Shannon and all of them are fucking awesome.
Geniuses.
But I don't know. It seems like it's still male dominated mostly because, and I this is my interpretation, it's just because I think men are more willing to put themselves out there. I think that's why Lisa Lampanelli and people like that work so well, is because it's like, whoa, you know, like this is pretty sexual, pretty self-deprecating, pretty whatever.
That's a newer thing.
Yeah.
There's a new wave of the sexual female comedian
in
the last 10 years, maybe the last decade or whatever. I think of somebody like Tina Fey, who's naturally very funny, but also super smart. And when you see her, whether she's performing or whether she's just on a talk show chopping it up, you feel like she's so good that she knows she doesn't always have to be funny. You know, sometimes she's just interesting. She's more like a Bill Hader, right? Like somebody who's deeply comedic and very funny, one of our best, but somebody who's also got an intelligence at a level that just makes them interesting. So yeah, Micah's a really good example. Micah is a very genuinely funny person with a very authentic voice. And I think that's something you're just born with that. You know what I mean? Like you're just really born. Something that can't be put on, really.
Well, it's always like, think about it. When you observe a relationship like externally, like a boyfriend and girlfriend, does the man ever describe the woman as like, oh, why? So like, why are you with her? It's like, oh, she's beautiful and she's sweet and all those things. But is ever like, she's hysterical. But usually it's like
sense of humor, though.
Sense of humor, I would say. Yeah. Okay. Like being able to take it. But I always feel like women describe men as funny. Right.
I think it's a good point.
There's something to it. It's not an innate thing. In other words, like I think men and women come out the womb with the potential of being equally funny. I think it's society that it's almost like the makeup mentality of like, think about that. Many women put on makeup just to go out of the house.
Sure.
And I walk out of the house in sweatpants and shell toes and could give a fuck.
We are unsightly. It's not.
But
even
that's
fair.
Like a mentality. Like that's like a comfort that I think taps into the self, especially the self-deprecating stuff. Anyway, we're getting way off topic, but I just
no, we are. But no, it's true. But you know, we're also born. Like I know for myself, Helene probably would have left me years ago. If I'm not that great looking. I'm not that smart. I don't have I'm not a brain surgeon, but I can make you laugh.
Mm-hmm. I
have that. I need that thing.
Me too.
Guys just need that thing. Like it's another leg for us to stand on. We don't really have anything else.
I actually agree with you. And I feel like I'm blessed to have someone like Micah because I'm probably so annoying when it comes down to it. You know, like where I'm always joking about something or speaking in some other voice or like talking to the dogs or just like, I'm like never,
That's good
10% of the time am I in any way serious. Right. Half the time I'm not. Half the time I'm literally speaking nonsense. And for some reason, she finds it, I guess, charming. But
I love this
hopefully
conversation.
we'll
we don't even need to do the show
Yeah.
today. This is so much fun.
Yeah. Anyway,
All right,
go
so
on,
I'm
Dave.
looking at your standings here, Carl.
Yeah.
You've got more right answers than wrong answers.
Okay,
so
that's
far.
good.
So you're on the right track.
Okay, great.
All right. Harvey Keitel, great actor.
Yeah.
Dating back to Mean Streets in the Scorsese camp. Is he still with us, Harvey Keitel?
I'm going to say no, just because I don't ever hear his name anymore.
Okay. All right, Carl. I wonder if you struggle with this one. Jimmy Page, one of the greatest guitarists of all time. Led Zeppelin.
Hasn't he been dead for a long time? Maybe not.
It's
One
up
of them
to you.
is, right? I don't know Zeppelin very well, to be honest. Dad would punch me right in the neck.
Dad's really yelling at you right now.
Yeah.
What are you going with?
Oh, I think he's dead. He's
Okay.
I think he's
You're
dead.
going
I honestly, like I only listened to a little Zeppelin when I was younger through Dad, and it wasn't until I went to 311 Day 2004. I'm wearing my 311 sweatshirt. 311 Day 2004, and they covered Dire Maker, and I was like, oh, this is dope. And then I got a little bit more into their discography, but I would be a poser to pretend that it's a very deep love. So I don't really know, to be honest. But
Okay.
I feel
I'm
like
glad
I don't
it's
ever
talking.
see. I don't feel like Zeppelin doesn't play, right? They haven't played in like
Not
decades.
that I know of.
So they would either be like a weird Police-like band where they just don't like each other and they don't want to play, or because like the money dangled in front of them. So yeah, I'm going to say he's dead. One of them's got to be dead. Yeah.
That's another thing. Like some of these people just kind of opted for obscurity. They don't need the money.
Mhm.
They did their thing. They don't have to be in the. I feel that way. I mean, I feel that way about certain people, but I don't want to give anything.
As
away.
I understand, the Police, when they got back together, like it was several $100 million. I think they were paid to do it. Like the three of them,
serious money.
Yeah, like serious
to
money.
draw them out.
Yeah.
To do it again.
Right.
Plus, they had famous hostilities with each other.
Right. Yeah. They didn't like each other at all.
They had to really patch it up. All right, Kyle. Oh, this is one I didn't know personally before I put this together. Bernie Mac.
Yeah, he's died. He died.
Okay.
Yeah. Sadly, young.
Kyle. Good fella. Famous good fella. Ray Liotta.
He's alive. Or did he die recently? No, I think he's alive. He's alive.
Okay.
I feel like I would.
Kyle, the man, Isaac Hayes. Isaac Hayes.
He died. I know that because of the whole. Didn't something happen with South Park or something with him, or am I thinking of something different?
He did the voice for Chef, right?
Yeah, and then there was either a falling out. No, I guess he didn't die because of that. There was a falling out though, or something with him.
Oh, I think you're right. There was some sort of famous.
But that wasn't because he
falling out with him
died. That he stopped. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to say he's
Matt
dead.
and Trey.
I'm going to say he's dead.
All right. Just double checking these to make sure. Okay, you got this one right, and I marked it wrong. Okay. All right, Kyle. Sidney Pollack, famous director, actor. It's the last thing I saw him in.
I don't even. Can I look? Can I look his face up?
Yeah, look him up. Yeah, of
Let me
course,
look
of
at
course.
what this is.
Yeah, because that's kind of an obscure one. I think the last thing I saw him in was Eyes Wide
Okay.
Shut.
He looks older. I'll say dead, but I don't. I wouldn't know. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Okay, and we got two more. We only got two more.
Okay.
Kyle, Clint Eastwood.
He's alive.
Okay. And last one. The voice of Darth Vader. James Earl Jones.
I think he's alive still. I don't know if he works anymore.
Okay. All right.
All right. How did I do? Was it decent?
Let's see how you did.
All right.
Let's rack it up. All right, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 correct out of 15.
So 9 and 6. That's not great.
Not terrible.
So yeah, who did I get wrong?
So Francis Ford Coppola,
Mm-hmm.
you said he was dead.
Mm-hmm.
He's very much alive.
Okay.
Jimmy Page, you said he was dead. He's with us.
Did someone from Zeppelin die like early on, or like not early on, but
who is the drummer? Bonham?
no? Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, Bonham is. Yeah, he was the one that died. He died,
passed.
right? In like the
As far
70s
as
or
I know,
80s?
he's dead. Robert Plant's still with us.
Let's.
Look up Bonham though, just to make sure.
Yeah, let me
we're
look here.
on the up and up here.
John Bonham. Yeah, he died 1980 at age 32. John Paul Jones is still alive. Robert Plant is still alive. Okay, so yeah, it was the drummer that died, but I guess it didn't. When's the last time they played? Yeah, years active, 1968 to 1980. So it was that guy dying, I guess, that did stop them from playing anymore.
1980. Can you believe
How did they never if the three of the four of them are alive, all due respect to John Bonham, who I know is an iconic rock drummer, but
sure, of course.
How does no one draw you out? That's so crazy. I would love to know more about that because I can't imagine the amount of money that they must have turned down to not play ever again.
Can you imagine? One of the most legendary rock bands of all time.
But it's
one
like
of the most influential.
Yeah, it's so interesting, man. It's I got to read more about this.
Leading man energy. Like when you have a rock god like Jimmy Page, who's not really the front man, and then you have a front man like Robert Plant, that's got to be weird. You know what I mean? It's like it has that dynamic, that very almost famous dynamic where it's like, you know, you're the lead guitarist with Mystique, and I'm the front man. You know what I mean? But
it reminds me,
the lead guitarist is really the superstar.
Yeah, it reminds me of like, it's not quite the same, but like you have bands with a little more attention, like Aerosmith. Not external tension, but like where it's like, who is the most famous of these guys?
Right, Mick and Keith.
Right, and yeah, of course. And I would even say, like to a lesser degree, like U2 with Bono and Edge.
Absolutely.
So we're really in Dad's wheelhouse with all these bands right now.
We really are.
Heavy.
He's either proud or yelling at us or a combination.
Yeah, I never. It's so interesting because I usually investigate random things like that where it's like, oh, they never played again. I got to look into that. I don't know shit about them though. I really don't.
Yeah, no, that's one of those bands that just opted for, you know, to kind of lay low and not take the money. But I mean, that's another thing too. You made so much money prior to the 80s that you don't even need to do anything anymore.
But isn't it interesting? Like, did they, like, by relative terms, like that's like they made millions of dollars relative to the time they were, but like you would think their potential to make more money would have grown exponentially with how much more expensive everything got over time. I always do think about that. Like they definitely were like set up for life. I'm not saying that.
Oh, sure.
But I'm just like, I think that they probably were like 1% power with their money, you know, where they could have been. That's so interesting. I'd like to know more about it. I'm sure, you know, who I know knows probably a lot about this is Ramon.
Ramon probably knows a ton about this. And also, are we forgetting about just the continual money that was rolling in just based off of the rights of
they
created?
That's true. Yeah.
The logo, the music, the icon, the icon.
Yeah, the t-shirts like alone.
T-shirts.
Zeppelin shirts are like the most famous rock shirts that you can buy. I mean, that's so funny. Yeah. But yeah, that's just a band. I don't know how, like, Dad like actively introduced me to a lot of bands and was like, you would like this or check this out, or I'd go through a CD cabinet. And for some reason, Zeppelin was just something I don't know why that never really came up for some reason. But anyway.
Yeah, Zeppelin was huge with that. All right.
Who else?
Clint Eastwood, you got correct. Mm-hmm. James Earl Jones was correct. Mm-hmm. Isaac Hayes, what did you said?
I said he died.
You said he died. So you got that one correct. And I got you marked correct. Marlon Brando, what'd you say about Brando?
I want to say dead.
Okay, Marlon Brando is dead, so you got that one correct.
Or maybe I said something else. I don't know. I don't want to cheat. I don't know for sure.
I think you did say it. I have an X here, so I think you did say dead. I should have put a little skull and crossbones. Bernie Mac, you guessed that right.
Yeah, I know he died. Like the Diana Ross and him, Diana Ross is dead, right? Like
Diana Ross is alive.
Oh, I thought she.
But you said she was alive.
No, I thought I should. I think you fucked this all up because I think I said.
Did I mess it up?
Yeah, I think you messed up your own game because I'm pretty sure I said that she.
Oh my God, I hope that's the only one I messed up. All right, so you're back to 9 then. God, did I butcher this whole thing?
Yeah, you might have. But because I'm pretty sure like I was like, oh, she's definitely dead, but I don't know who I got her confused with. Maybe like a Whitney Houston or something, like another.
No, she's another one who just kind of, she's still ticking. Her daughter who's I don't know what her daughter like was a model, but largely worked outside of the public purview. Was on NPR recently talking about Diana Ross and what a great mom she was when they were growing up and stuff. And during the interview, I was like, oh shit, is this like some kind of tribute? But she's still alive. So I thought you guessed that correctly. which surprised me. Scheider, you said, was dead.
Yeah, I think maybe you put an X extra name because I was wrong.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I should have.
My God, you fucked this
I have
whole
a
thing
little
up.
check. I have my little check boxes and everything.
It's brutal.
I still messed up.
It's brutal how you fucked this up.
Pollock, you said, was right, and Ray Liotta, you said, was dead. Right. So I thought you got a 10 out of 15, but you're back down to 9 with the Diana Ross one. So you did good.
Yeah,
that's not bad. These were purposely meant to stump you. So
well, good.
Maybe the games won't be back. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, at least keep the rubric a little cleaner next time. Jesus.
I'm a mess. All right.
Let's get into the topic at hand. Was thinking about, so you'll find this funny because I don't think I said this to you when I came up with this topic, which is Jaws, the 1975 film. I was watching football, the championship games, and I was like, oh yeah, I got to come up with a topic. Or we got to like figure out a topic for Knockback this week. And I knew I didn't want it to be a game. So I was like, oh, I'll do a movie. And then I immediately looked up at the screen and there was like, I don't know what it was, a commercial for something with a hammerhead or like some sort of great huge shark on it. And I was like, oh. And I was like, that's when I texted you. I was like, let's do Jaws. That's literally when I texted you that. And I'm happy that I did. I feel like I've seen this movie before, but I don't remember very much of it at all. I also have never seen the subsequent ones. There's 3 more Jawses, I think. There's one, there's Jaws 2, right. Jaws 3, and then Jaws The Return or whatever they call it. And I've never seen any of those. And it's all wrapped up by 1987. There's also the game. Is it LJN that did the game?
Yes, I think it was LJN.
And I remember our neighbor Brian Weiss had that game. And that's how I was familiar with it. Because I was like, what is this random? So that was like my major familiarity with Jaws. But Jaws was a pretty common TV movie and cable TV movie, but also network TV movie. I was reading about it, how like it first premiered on network TV in like the late 70s and stuff. So, and it's not very violent. So you don't have to cut. That's actually one of the things I think that is great about the movie is it shows so little. Now I know a lot of that has to do with production issues, but it's so funny how serendipitous that was because it makes it work. The movie is more of a thriller in some sense than a horror movie. And obviously a lot of dramatic elements, but I'm glad I picked this out. So I sat down, watched it all the way through with Micah and yeah, really, really liked it. Brisk 2 hours, fun to watch, great characterization. I mean, I think the only thing that I would say that I think was a little distracting was the performance of Robert Shaw as Quint only because of Charlie in Always Sunny in Philadelphia doing. Have you ever seen the episode, the Halloween episode where he does the whole speech from Jaws or whatever? Yes. And I hear him doing that guy's voice so perfectly that it's basically ruined that whole character because I love Always Sunny so much. You know, it's a doll's eyes. And yeah, and Charlie's like, I seen it once in a rat instead of which I think is so funny.
I forgot all about that.
And I always think of that stupid scene from that Halloween episode of Always Sunny. But what do you think of Jaws? I wrote here in my notes, and I thought it would be an interesting place to start off too, is this is the world that you were born into, really. So you're seeing it we're seeing like a very contemporary movie for your infancy and being a toddler and stuff, which I think is kind of interesting to look at it. Like you were there in some sense, which is pretty neat. So anyway, take it away. Jaws.
Yeah, I love going back to the mid 70s, man. That's the world I came into. That's what it looked like, at least in New England, slightly north of where I actually was. You know what's funny, man? One of my earlier memories, it couldn't have been 75 because when this movie came out, I was 1. I'd be 2 years old. I would turn 2 later in the year, later in 75. So I was 1 when this movie hit the theaters. So it couldn't have been from 75, but it's altogether realistic that maybe this memory's from the late 70s. But I remember very vividly being at Aunt Barbara's house on Long Island for a party. It was either one of the kids, one of our cousins' birthdays, or maybe it was a christening or a communion or something. And I remember the adults huddled around talking in hushed tones about Jaws, about this movie, about this shark, this killer shark. Remember it very vividly in my memory, like what, like, oh shit, what are they talking about? And never actually saw Jaws until probably the early 90s. Never saw it in its entirety until then. And I think leading up to the hype of Jurassic Park and already being a big Steven Spielberg mark, it was like, and starting to get into films like late in high school and between high school and early in college, like I zeroed in on, I love Steven Spielberg, right? He was probably the second director I was ever aware of as a kid after George Lucas, of course, Star Wars. But he was the second name where I was like, I like the things this guy does. I like the things he's attached to. So I thought of E.T., I thought of Raiders, right? Eventually Temple of Doom. I knew he was associated with Poltergeist. I knew he was associated with Goonies. So it was like, I need to consume everything about this director because I always like what he does, you know? And I had already seen, believe it or not, probably early in the 90s, Duel, his very first made-for-TV movie, which, guys, go watch this movie. You got to watch it. It's basically about road rage, but I won't ruin it for you, but it's a wonderful film. And just thinking like, I got to consume everything Spielberg. I'm a huge Spielberg fan. And finally seeing this movie in its entirety, it's one of the great popcorn movies. And you can't give yourself a film, you know, you can't really become a film student and be a fan of film without going through this movie. It's a great thriller. It's really cool because it's a film done early in a great filmmaker's career. So you could kind of see all the hallmarks that would go on to make Spielberg famous and bits of genius, but it's also a little problematic, which is cool. Takes a huge page out of Alfred Hitchcock's book, which I think is really neat. And that's the other thing. It was a pop culture phenomenon, brilliantly sort of referencing something that we could all relate to and all be afraid of, you know, and just one of the great thrillers and one of the great early stories of a filmmaker that I could think of. Like, it's a great early effort. And something, when you watch it, you're like, wow, you know what? This could not have been done exactly like it was done without this young filmmaker's not only courage, but his ignorance. Because no experienced director would have ever bitten off, no pun, this type of movie. Obviously it's famous now that Spielberg had no idea what he's getting himself into, but that's all over this movie. And the fact that this went on to create a superstar in Spielberg, you know, this is kind of where it started with him. This is where he went on to be a household name. So one that's been on the list for a long time, happy to talk about it. And, just a lot to say about this movie. Even after all these years, there's still a lot to the discussion, I think. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. And reading about it, I didn't realize that it was kind of a classic Hollywood option situation where they discovered a book that was being written and got in kind of on the ground floor and acquired the rights fairly cheap to do it. And then, as you said, I'm pretty sure the movie made $500 million unadjusted, which is, I mean, like, that's so much money. I think it went over budget significantly, but still under $10 million, and they made that much money. I mean, it's 50x, and I just think that that's so incredible. They were probably so thrilled. And obviously you can see where Steven Spielberg, where his power comes from. It comes from this movie, actually. And I guess I didn't really know that. It was only his second movie, which I wasn't aware of. And then they roll right into, he and Richard Dreyfuss roll right into Close Encounters, right? Right after this.
That's right. Yeah, not too long after.
And then, obviously George Lucas is kind of in his camp, and John Milius, I'm pretty sure, is kind of bumping around at this point, which is awesome. Yeah,
he wrote some of this.
Yeah, and I love John Milius. Red Dawn is our absolute shit. You know, I just love
Walter.
Yeah, Walter, exactly, from Big Lebowski. I don't know if you know, I can't remember her name, but his daughter is a pretty big player in like the MAGA movement. I don't know if you know.
I didn't know this.
I can't remember her name. She worked in the White House for Trump, but it's like something Milius, and she's like I
had no idea.
An arch conservative or whatever. And he was obviously notoriously very conservative, right, and says that he thinks that affected his career a great deal or whatever. I also didn't know that he had a point on Star Wars. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that apparently I read it on Wikipedia actually, that Spielberg and George Lucas exchanged points with each other on Star Wars, Close Encounters, and Apocalypse Now, I think.
Sure. They were on the same camp.
Right. And so like they each gave each other a point of each movie.
Wow. Yeah. I did not know. I wonder if that was just like a backroom deal, or if he script doctored on that too, because he's in a lot of things as a writer. Like he comes in, he's either ghostwriting or
he doesn't get credited for a lot of the stuff he's done.
No, and he probably liked it that way. And also, if he was problematic in Hollywood, that he was a little anti-establishment with his political views, but these people all liked him. That was a way of not only protecting themselves but protecting him. Which is kind of neat. It's kind of neat. The way they did it in the old guard. Yeah,
he almost became like the forgotten member of that trifecta, but I wonder if they're all still cool with each other.
I'm sure.
Whatever.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So about the book, like I didn't realize that it was a book. I didn't know that. And usually I feel like, again, it's one of those things you think you would know. It's like, oh yeah, that's based on a book, but I had no idea Jaws was a book. And the book takes place on Long Island.
Yeah.
So how'd you feel about that? I was a little annoyed when I read that. I'm like, damn, because it's funny. I'm sure Mikey gets annoyed at my commentary as we watch movies, but there's a shot of this idyllic sand-strewn village or whatever. And I'm like, that looks like Long Island. And then went and immediately looked it up. And I was like, does this take place on Long Island? And it's like, no, it's like some fictional New England thing, but the book did. And I guess they did consider filming it on Long Island, but didn't. Probably would have been very prohibitively expensive. They're on Martha's Vineyard, I think. And dude, it's so cool. I love the Northeast beaches. I think they're just so special and so interesting. The cedar shingles and
love it.
Just like the unpaved roads, and reminds me of Fire Island and parts of Long Island where we're from and all of that. So, but I was disappointed. I was like, because when I saw it, I was like, it takes place on Long Island. And I was like, usually that. I'm like, how did I not know that Jaws took place there? That's like something you feel like you would know. But it wasn't so. Why do you think they kind of shook that off and went to New England instead? I wonder what the point of that was.
Yeah, because as far as I know, Peter Benchley's novel was based on a real incident that supposedly happened off the coast of Long Island in real life, where a commercial fisherman accidentally caught a nearly 5,000-pound great white shark on his line. And then he was like, oh, I'm going to write this story about this monster shark that just, he's like a kaiju. He terrorizes everything off the coast of Long Island. I don't know if it was Block Island. I don't know if it was Fire Island, but it was maybe it was off the coast of Montauk, which they do shout out in the movie. They shout out Long Island a couple of times in this. But I read briefly that they opted for Cape Cod / Martha's Vineyard, the New England beaches, because even the, I guess, Hamptons of the 70s was a little too congested. Like they were just going to run into too many problems with, crowds and too many people in the shot and stuff like that. And I guess Martha's Vineyard, at least back then, was a little more low key. So they just said we could get the same, like you said, the same aesthetic. We get the cedar shake houses, the same exact look, which is a timeless look, by the way. I mean, that's still the way these places look, whether you're talking about Martha's Vineyard or Cape Cod or Bellport or Fire Island. Like they all have that timeless, Northeastern beach town look, which is such a big part of our childhood, our childhood.
Yeah, that's when they show that helicopter kind of vignette I was like, that's where the rich people live on Long Island. I'm like, that's not where I'm from. That's like the Long Island of what was that popular Showtime show, The Affair? I think that
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was on Showtime. That took place in Montauk, and that's like kind of a lot of the vibe of that show too. And I'm like, yeah, that's like where like the very rich people live. And they won't have it. And there will be. And Long Island's going to be underwater in 50 years anyway. So enjoy it while you can.
Long Island. Oh, I hope that's not true. Everything's underwater now, though. Look at what happened in San Diego this week.
What happened? I don't think I saw that.
It got flooded out.
Oh, really? Yeah, everything's all fucked up. There's no doubt.
Infrastructure. I guess they got 3 inches of rain in an hour or something. I don't know. San Diegans could text us or DM me if I'm inaccurate, but their storm infrastructure wasn't ready for it.
Oh, for like
supposedly like a really like kind of the low-lying, sort of low-income area of the city, and they got buried. Sad. I
don't even think I saw that. That is sad.
Yeah.
I saw something similar happen in Los Angeles when like it got poured upon, and there's nowhere for the water to go, basically, because they're not used to it.
They're not used to that level of rain.
It's like, again, I'm not a catastrophist with that kind of stuff, but I don't. It's clearly changing in some way. We have presumptions of knowing how everything works. At the same time, it's like, don't build your fucking cities along the water, I guess, but at the same time, there's no doubt that something's amiss out there, and it sucks. But
yeah, I mean, look what happened at Mom's at the Jersey Shore. That was 10 years ago, right? They were not expecting that catastrophic. And that was post hurricane season, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was late.
It was late.
Yeah, I remember being in the fall. Yeah.
So yeah, it was that was
Or
that
like
was
the late summer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the vibe's cool. I love the fashion. I love watching the people that party scene, totally incidental, but in the beginning when the first woman gets killed by the shark or whatever, it's just so funny watching the people there. Some things just never change in some sense. Beer, cigs, weed, everyone just hanging out, pairing up, someone going out into the waters, foolishly going into the water at night. Have you ever gone into the ocean at night? I don't think I've ever actually gone all the way in. I've walked like along it before, but I don't think I've ever gone in, because it's fun to be on the beach at night. But yeah, going into the water is a little bit.
It's such a great vibe. Yeah, I have. I definitely have. I've done it in Jersey. I've done it in Myrtle Beach. Did it definitely in South Carolina, Emerald Islands. We used to go in do that a lot. They have I don't know if it was in Myrtle Beach or if it was in North Carolina, but they have these things down there. People that listen to us from down south will know, called ghost crabs, and they pop up along the sand as you're walking at night, and they run along with you and then duck back into the sand. It's really cool. So we would run along the beaches to get these ghost crabs to come up and run along with us and then go back down. It was so, you know what though? I'm absolutely terrified of the ocean as an adult now with a family. Something has set in with me over the last 5 years. Maybe I've mentioned this before on Knockback or Constellation, but the idea of this vast sort of infinitely deep body of water where anything can be under there, especially being at vantage points where you're out on the ocean and you can't see land in 360 degrees, that horrifies me now. That's why I would never go on a cruise. Like the idea of the deep and the ocean going on for miles and miles and this being this limitless thing, it never scared me as a kid. But the whole idea of it now terrifies me. I don't know if I just thought of it too much. But even swimming on the beach, because I love the beach. My family loves the beach, spend a lot of time on the beach each year. But that's like in my head now, like it's never been. I think I mentioned it when I was talking about surfing on Constellation, that I want to do surfing, but what flies in the face of that, becoming a surfer, is just that I'm a good swimmer, but the idea of the ocean swallowing you up, I don't know, there's just something about it that's like in my head now.
The ocean's just interesting in that it's just, you're nothing in it. I think I've said this to you in some context in the past, that I like watching once in a while, and like my random YouTube rabbit holes are solo sailors. Do you ever watch any of these guys?
No.
And they sail like by themselves from like Europe to the United States, or from like the United States to, Hawaii or whatever. And
That's crazy.
And they chronicle it, and they're just totally alone and no internet. So they're just filming it. They have I think every ship has like certain connectivity to each other, like, but through satellite, but there's just, otherwise they're just, he's just reading and cooking and dealing with all the different things that it throws at you in the crazy weather and stuff. And it is nuts. And you look around, they always do these pan shots and stuff. And it's like, you just drop right into this thing and nothing would change.
Hundreds of miles from the nearest land.
It's very interesting. And that's where they say the alien fabrication plants are in this UAP situation, is deep in the water, because we don't see it. We can't. It's easy to hide things there, especially like when you think about the Marianas Trench or something. It's like 8 miles deep, but you just think about like there are parts of the ocean that are miles deep for hundreds of miles around. We don't know anything about what's going on in these places.
It's crazy.
It's very interesting.
It's all but inaccessible. So essentially, what does that mean? That there's like a whole nother planet on this planet.
Right, exactly.
It's so odd.
It's like episode 1. What was the planet Naboo?
Right,
where they have like people above and people below, which is kind of interesting.
Right. I hope it's not that corny,
Boss Nass living under there. Maybe there's a rapture under there or something. That would be pretty cool from BioShock. Okay, let's see. So, God, I have so many things that I wrote down. What do you think about the vibe of this area? Do you feel like you're on the beach a lot, and you were saying, and I feel like this way about this movie, is that it really does show how little things actually do change. Like, people are so similar. Movies are such a cool way to remind everyone how similar people are, how similar the way we speak and act and all the rest. So what did you think about the beach vibe? I loved the mayor character with his anchor jacket, and just
the anchor jacket.
And just all the businessmen just being so worried about the season. And it makes sense. Obviously, they're probably dead most of the year, but it's got such a heavy vibe in terms of it's like we really need this to happen. Like fuck these people. Like sharks are getting eaten. Like for instance, there's the thing with when Brody knows that someone died, then the woman comes in her very dramatic black dress and slaps him, and she's like, you knew, but there's like no consequences for that. Like no one seems to care, which I thought was kind of a plot hole. But anyway, you take it. How do you feel about all this?
I mean, I love the atmosphere. I have to say, I've never been to Cape Cod or Martha's Vineyard. We were supposed to go. I was going to take Helene on a sort of like, Helene's always like, you never organize anything. And she loves to plan trips and everything. So I took, I sort of took it into my own hands 2 years ago. This was going to be, this would have been almost a year and a half ago, 2022. I made plans for us to go just by ourselves, just me and Helene, to go to Cape Cod and then across to Martha's Vineyard. Never been to that area. And we famously love like all the beach spots, right? We obviously love the Jersey Shore. I love the Hamptons. We love Charleston, South Carolina, the Outer Banks. We really like Cape Charles down there in Maryland and Virginia. So that was one spot we just knew we would like, but we'd never been to the New England beaches before. So I planned it, and then somebody got COVID, gave Helene COVID. I had to cancel the whole thing. And shout out to the inn where I was staying on Cape Cod, because they refunded all my money and they didn't have to refund 1 cent of it. So that was really cool. That was a really cool look. So when we go back, I'm going to stay at that place just to thank them again for that. But I like the familiarity. It feels very similar to where we grew up. We grew up on Bellport, South Shore, middle of Long Island, west of the Hamptons, but across from Fire Island. So a very beachy, beach vibey place that's very reminiscent of the North Atlantic beaches, like the New England stuff, like Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard. So I love that familiarity and that vibe. But dude, can we get into the mayor for a second?
Yeah, go on.
This guy.
Larry Vaughn is the character's name. The actor is Murray Hamilton.
Murray Hamilton, shout out. Great character actor. I love this part. I love kind of the slime ball mayor, but listen, did you really stop and think about it? The last time I watched this now, a couple of nights ago, I really thought about it. Like, this mayor's got to be on the take, right? He's just the mayor. So this isn't the proprietor of the local hotels. He doesn't own a chain of restaurants, as far as we know. He's not responsible for the bike rentals. Like, he doesn't really, unless he's on the take, right? Why, from his perspective, who cares if people are going to be there?
Wait,
he would actually have an easier job.
I totally disagree with you. He's afraid of of losing his electorate and not being supported politically by having bad economic situations. If he's blamed.
Is that what this is?
That's what I thought. Is like, I read it as like, he doesn't want to be blamed for the bad economy that would come if we let the Coast Guard know and we reported this and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like he was protecting himself politically. He might be on the take, but that's like, to me, I'm like that. I don't see any indication of that. I just see a dude like a craven politician. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That's how I read it.
I could buy that 100%. That makes more sense to me now. So it's like, okay, so he is kind of attached to it. And of course they're relying on tourist season. Like Kyle said, this is their time to bring in the ducats, but let me go explain this one to me. Let's go one level further, or one level deeper. He's got flocks of tourists on the beach. They're spending money. They're buying their hot dogs, right? They're renting their bikes, and they got their room and board. Why does he care if they're swimming or not?
That's
what the fuck.
Micah said the same thing. He's like, get out there and swim out there, won't you?
Why do they? Is he now? Now it's clear this guy is a murderer. Right? He's got everything he wants. He's got flocks of tourists. They all came in off the ferries. They're spending money left and right. They're on the beach. You got your lifeguards there. The economy's roaring on Amity Island / Martha's Vineyard, wherever this is supposed to be, right? Why do they need to be in the water?
Yeah, it's a great point. He's
only trying to murder people.
Well, it is interesting that, yeah, he could have had, like you said, he could have had it all in the sense that this was post capturing the first shark, right? So isn't that true? Right. So
the teenage girl, the hippie got killed. And then the little kid the widow kid got devoured.
Right, but they capture the first shark and then all of this happens. So what I'm saying is that like people were still willing to go, but were sufficiently cautious. And so like you say, he could have had it all where it's like no one would have went into the water. In fact, people probably would have spent more money because they would have been out and about doing things and not necessarily being in the water. So he did kind of shoot himself in the foot, like flew a little too close to the sun.
What the hell was that?
Also, I wrote this. I wanted to make sure I wrote this in my notes that there is that scene with that old man on the beach around that time who has breasts. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but he has tits. The old
guy with the hat where he says nice hat.
I don't know. It's like an old man that leans in and has breasts. I'm going to look this up and see. The man in Jaws with boobs.
Is it the swimmer with the swimming cap on that gets out and then talks to Roy
I think so. Yeah. He like leans towards him. Yeah. This is it.
That's him. And he says nice hat or whatever. And he walks
do you remember when Harry has a... Yeah, this is... I'm glad someone else noticed this here. I'm putting it in the chat for you. It's like, what is going on with this guy? This guy has B-cup breasts.
He making fun of this guy's man boobs. And he's not a big guy. He's a skinny dude, right?
Yeah, he's just got... Yeah, it's the guy with the swimming cap. It's
I see him. Yeah.
It's very strange.
Swimming cap, yeah.
Very, very strange.
That's a little weird. You're right. I wasn't...
Like, they couldn't find anyone else. Like, everyone's filming this and they're like, hey, hey, Steven, maybe we can get like another old man that doesn't have...
he looks like the dude...
breasts.
Why can't I think of the actor's name from Patrick
Stewart?
He plays in Star Trek.
Patrick Stewart.
Stewart.
Yeah.
He looks like Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, he does kind of look at Patrick Stewart. If Patrick Stewart had boobs.
Stewart look with boobs and one ear. You know what? I was so distracted. You know why I didn't notice this guy's boobs? Because he's got the one ear sticking out and his other ear is tucked in to the swimming cap. And I was preoccupied by that. But now I see the man does have some impressive breasts.
So I don't want to be rude here, but are Brody and so Roy Scheider and Lorraine Gary are the parents and not the grandparents of the kid?
They're the parents.
Yeah, they just look so old.
Do they look that old to you? Okay, they look old enough maybe to have teenage kids, and they have little boys.
Lorraine Gary in this, she was born in 1937, so 70. So she'd be in her 40s, right?
She'd be, yeah.
And so I don't know. I'm like, I don't know. It's just so strange. That's the one thing that marks time and all of this different stuff. I mean, I'm not like, God's gift to man at all, but I don't think I look that a hard 39. So I wanted
you know what? Roy Scheider's got to be, there's a lot to consider here. And maybe I understand why you're bringing up these points. It's a little messy because he's got to be a retired cop. So he's got to be old enough to be retired. So let's say you retire in your 40s, which is early, but maybe he can. Now he's got little boys though. He's got like a 3-year-old and what's the other kid? 8 maybe. Right. So he's got to be old enough, but he can't be, I don't know. I didn't really think of them looking too old. I thought of her though, that it was such a relief to see something even this early, like mid 70s. I know Lorraine Gary was super studio executive Sin Sheinberg's wife, but I thought she was really good in the part because she had she was unfamiliar. So you could buy her as a mom because you weren't thinking of her from something else, right, at least at that time. But she had this kind of like weird Kathy Moriarty meets Carol Burnett vibe to her.
Yeah.
Right. That seemed kind of right for the part. Now that I'm thinking about their age though. And you know what? The other thing is too, like Roy Scheider, he's got charisma. So I don't know if they should have been younger or if maybe you just make them older, because I don't even know if he was striking me as a retiree. You know what I mean? I'm not sure the casting was, even though I liked them in the parts, I'm not sure casting appearance wise was appropriate for either one of them.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to know more. We can write a little bit more fan fiction about this. Perhaps the kids are like their children's, they have a daughter who has a drug problem and she pawned her kids off on her parents and she lives somewhere out west. Yeah,
maybe she had the kids young.
Right.
She had the kids at 17. It's a wedlock thing. she had problem. Yeah, I like it. I know, it just goes back to what you're saying. Do they seem more like grandparents? I think the answer is yes.
What do you think about Robert Shaw's performance as Quint? Talk to me about this character.
Dude, he brings we see him, an appearance at, town hall when they're having the town meeting, whatever. And he kind of puts his thing on the table and says, this is my bounty or whatever. And then we don't see him again for a little while. When he comes back into the movie, like let's say halfway through, that's when things get kicked into high gear for me in terms of the gravity and the performances. Like he almost comes in and raises everybody's performance to the next level. I think he's super, he's super good. You could tell he's got that British actor pedigree. He gives that great soliloquy. He brings like a sort of cartoonish Popeye the Sailor Man type vibe to the thing, but he's also very believable. I like that he's got this shoddy boat. His gear, his clothing is all grimy and sort of tobacco stained. He seems like a legitimate, genuine old seaman. And then of course he kind of cuts across with, with the Hooper character, who's also kind of cut from the same cloth like this guy of the ocean, but he's the white collar version, and Quint is the blue collar, salt of the earth version of this. So I think it's sick. I think it's a cool, when he comes into the movie, I think that's when it seems like a very 70s bubblegummy, popcorny atmosphere for me. And then when he comes into the movie, the atmosphere of the movie changes. Then it becomes like almost watching, I don't know, insert movie here, like an old World War II ocean movie. He brings a whole different vibe to the atmosphere. Like the atmosphere shifts when this guy comes into it and stays in the picture, not just a little appearance in the beginning. So I like that. It's not that often you see a movie who a single character could just change the whole feel of the film. And I know it's kind of, we laugh about it now. We've had it for so many decades, and it's a very over the top performance, and it's been lampooned endlessly, like in Always Sunny, but there's something about it that just hits right.
Yeah, it's awesome. He died a few years after this, which is interesting. I didn't know that.
He never saw the 80s, right?
Yeah, which is interesting. But I loved the performance. It's so over the top. That scene when at the town meeting where he's just like saying he'll do it for $10,000. I did go on to the inflation calculator to adjust the money for modernity to give it a little bit of a feel. So after the second attack, they raise a $3,000 bounty, like through local businesses or like that specific rich benefactor, which would be $17,600 today. But then Quint comes in and says he'll do it for $10,000, which would be $59,000.
Wow.
He also
still though, he's blowing up his whole boat even before.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's really worth it.
Dude, what are you doing? You're going to need a whole new boat.
Yeah, he's like, his whole death wish thing is so funny how he like kind of gets what he's looking for, I think, towards the end. But
yeah, he's got that Ahab Moby Dick sort of suicidal quest. Like that was the one that was, you get the feeling like he thinks, or maybe it was one of the same sharks from the Indianapolis incident.
Yeah. Is there a theory about that? I don't know. That'd be so interesting if you like, why would that be? Like, how could that be?
He was the ringleader shark.
Yeah. Like he was
so many years ago
when he was in the water after the Indianapolis, he like had this like crazy fight with a shark and scared it away. And he knows he like scratched an X on it or something. And then he sees that same X is on this shark in the same position as scarred over and weathered.
And the shark got a taste and liked it, like Captain Hook and the crocodile.
Right.
Like, now the shark wants the rest.
Right.
And he will not stop until he gets this.
So one of my favorite parts of the movie in this recent viewing was all the kind of crazy people that are attracted to the island to look for the shark. And I do love how they show all that, like these guys with like, there's just a funny scene when they're all congregated and they're just throwing chum in the water and like shooting at the water and casting these nets. And it's just like such pandemonium. It's very funny.
They're all wildly incapable. They have boats that are just not up to the task.
Right. It's like, I know value of money is so different today. And I'm not saying about real value. I'm saying like what things cost. For instance, computers are mega cheap today, but they were really expensive in the 80s. And so I wonder, like, $3,000 was $17,600 today. It just doesn't seem like an appropriate draw. Like, some of these guys have like a group. I think there's a group of like 8 of them that catches the. So it's like you're each going to get
in this little dinghy,
right? Like $400 or something, $350 for all of this craziness, and you're throwing. There's that one guy that throws like an explosive in the water and stuff like that. It's very funny.
So good.
But they do ultimately end up catching it. It is frustrating that they don't just cut the stomach of the shark open at that moment to see. Like, I'm glad that they finally do get to that after. Like, why does Hooper go to their house with the wine? Like, I don't really understand. Was it to ply him to get access to the shark and it ended up working, or what was that all about? He just shows up.
That was weird.
It's very like there seems to be things missing in like scenes that are missing.
Yeah, you know what? Now that you mention that, it is weird. Like it cuts to the chase a little too fast. He comes in, he's obviously unwelcome by the natives, right? And I think they try to kind of paint him, at least in some half-assed way, of like, here's this highfalutin guy. Yeah, he's an ocean dude, but he's got, he's coming with the silver spoon. This is kind of the white collar dude come to our small little town, and he's asked to come though. That's the thing. Like, Chief Brody asks him to come. They need a marine biologist,
right? But he asked him to come to the island, right? Like, but not to dinner,
right? And then he comes with the wine,
right? It's just very weird. He's dressed in like a suit. I don't really know what was going on in that scene. I was a little confused by that scene.
He eats the dinner.
Yeah, which is funny. It's very funny. And I know that they wanted to make it funnier, which I think this might be one of those things that they added to the scene, I also know that they apparently improv'd a lot, or at least like wrote things on the fly. Be interesting to know which is which. I think that there's a pretty extensive Laserdisc documentary about.
Oh, I don't know if I saw that.
That's like 2 hours. That was on like the Laserdisc release in the 90s.
Oh.
That would be pretty interesting about how it was all made. Yeah, it'd be awesome.
That's cool. That's really cool.
But
I mean, the thing about him though, Kyle, the Hooper character, he's interesting. I mean, I like Richard Dreyfuss as a young Richard Dreyfuss. He kind of has that sort of white collar energy to him. Like he kind of seems a little smarmy, like he's kind of acting a little better than everybody else. He's got to humble himself to be there, and they need an expert. But what's cool about the character is he seems to not only be knowledgeable, but he does seem to genuinely care. But maybe it's the thing of he's ingratiating himself with this reluctant police chief who that's another fascinating dynamic. You got this police chief who's retiring from New York City, where, he was very busy, down and dirty, dealing with a lot of, murderous conditions and all that kind of thing. He's coming to Martha's Vineyard / Amity Island for this easy retirement. Nothing's happened. Nobody's been murdered here in 25 years. It's the complete opposite side of the coin from where he's coming from, right? And now, not only that, he's saddled with the fact that he hates the water and he hates boats. So you got this guy trying to ingratiate himself with this reluctant police chief. But the thing is, he's kind of doing it before he even knows that kind of stuff. It's like, why did he pop up at the house for dinner with 2 bottles of wine, uninvited, to twist the arm of somebody that he didn't even know he needed to twist the arm of yet? Yeah, it was almost like they almost storyboarded that out of sequence or something.
Yeah.
We needed a little more information first. Yeah, he knew what we knew.
We need some information first. A little Pink Floyd,
nice,
horrible Pink Floyd impression. It's funny because I did like his character. I did like that kind of. They get into it, like how he has money. They don't really get into why or how, but there is some sort of. I've observed this myself. Not that I'm like an aqueous person or whatever, but we did come from Long Island and know a lot of those kinds of people and been on boats and did a lot of stuff on the water. But it's like there is a tension between the blue collar and the white collar presence on the water. And I think what's cool about this movie in some sense is that it doesn't diminish the white collar experience. Like he knows exactly what he's doing, and he kind of forces Quint to realize that you don't have to have been on, in the US Navy in World War II to know how to tie these knots and to do these things. And Quint quickly comes to trust him. There's that cool scene where he asks the Brody to chum the water, and he's like, why doesn't he'd do it instead. And he's like, well, he drives the boat. So like he already like respects him, I guess, and understands that he knows what he's doing. It's funny when he ties that first knot, he just throws it at him, and Quint doesn't even look at it. It just bounces off just bounces off his chest. It's such a ridiculous
he's got metal. He's not just
a
rich dude. You know what I mean? And he's courageous.
Yeah,
he's got courage. He's an interesting character.
Yeah, he's got like all the scars and he's done things. And so I think that was kind of cool that they didn't, there's a place and time obviously for that in fiction to diminish the role of the rich person who really shouldn't be there. And this is very common in certain spheres. Like as I understand it, it's very common in like archaeology. It's common in F1 racing. I think it's common in just all these different things that you can buy your way into. And so he has this amazing boat with these sophisticated tools and all the rest, but doesn't end up really, he is in some way better at all of this than Quint even is. And it is funny, like, yeah, Quint just is kind of on a suicide mission with it, like the ship is just getting fucked and he's very calm and nonchalant, but he's seen some shit too. So he knows that this is not the worst situation he's ever been in. Like no situation is going to be as bad as that situation was. And that's an interesting way to go through life. And so he reflects that, but him like fucking up the radio and stuff. And you would think, where was everyone when this was all going on with the shores in the background? Like people should be able to see this. And like, there's no urgency. Like no one notices that this is all happening. It's pretty funny. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Dave, was about the special effects and the shark and the violence and the blood and gore. This was a movie. And again, I don't really remember watching it as a kid and I haven't seen it as an adult on the movie channels and stuff, but this was a movie with like a vibe about it, or like parents were like, oh, you don't watch Jaws. It's very scary. It's very horrible. But actually, Jaws isn't really very violent at all. I mean, there's like a few scenes that are somewhat scary and somewhat violent, but I think it's very restrained, especially for the time and place in which it was made, where that could have been a very easy thing to go overboard with. And I think it actually enhances the movie. I was curious what you thought of that. Like they show so little, and I know a lot of that has to do with just issues that they wanted to show more and do more, but it works. Like it was, again, like I said earlier, that's total serendipity to say like, oh yeah, you can't make this happen anyway, so it's not going to be in here. And that's what makes it so scary, is you see the shark just for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah. It has an almost made for TV feel. Like if you cut out a few things with a clever edit, you could definitely, and they did, they got this on TV. I think the upsetting bit is there are a few young people / kids that die sort of on screen / on screen, off screen. There are kids dying in the movie, and you do see the ocean water turning red, and you see a leg floating down to the, to the ocean surface and all that kind of thing. But so there is some mildly upsetting stuff, but again, it's very Hitchcockian, the way everything's presented. It's more tension and more just the way it played out. I'm sure that robotic shark that they had, that Bruce robotic shark that almost never worked, and that was so problematic during the film shoot. I'm sure if things went according to plan, it would have been a much different movie. But the fact that there's so much show, don't tell, there's so much tension, there's so much build, there's very little actually seeing the shark. There's a lot of buildup. There's a lot of teasing. There's a lot of foreplay. It's a very classic Hitchcockian thriller, the way it turned out. And I think if you take that and you take the acting and you take the writing and you take John Williams's music, I think it all builds up to like a really proper thriller where you're building to a payoff. And I don't think it was intended that way. I think because it was so problematic to actually shoot on the Atlantic Ocean and actually shoot with this robotic shark and to shoot with kids and to shoot on boats in a turbulent sea and all that kind of thing. I think the fact that 2 and 2 came together and fortunately made this movie, but so it was fortunate for them the way it came out. And I love the way it came out. I love the kind of the slow burn and the build up. But yeah, I don't, it's funny because this was not, I don't remember mom and dad ever cautioning me about this movie. It was always those two movies that I say. It was Close Encounters for some reason. I don't know why that was on their radar. And Flashdance, which I still have not seen. Those are the two movies.
They definitely didn't want you to see that.
Those were forbidden. And one of them I still haven't seen. But yeah, Jaws was not. I remember the din of like the adults talking about it, like, oh, don't let little Billy see that, type of thing. Because that was the thing. I don't think it was even that you see surfers or a sailor or something getting murdered. You see kids dying in it. And that's kind of heavy for the mid 70s. You know, movies were getting grittier in the 70s, but it was definitely a slow build to something to that degree. You know, it was like that thing where you don't kill children in a movie, you don't kill dogs. You know, those are the taboos.
There was that scene with the dog in this. There's like a cute black dog, and I'm like, they better not kill that fucking dog.
And they don't.
They don't. Yeah, I was gonna get so upset. I was like, oh no, you can't do that to the dog. People will be very sensitive about that today, which is funny.
Yeah, isn't that funny how that's become even more so, or even more of a thing?
I mean, I'm very sensitive to it too. I don't want to see that shit. Like in The Last of Us Part 2, you this is not a spoiler. I mean, you kill dogs in the game, and it's like, you know, that are like with enemies or whatever, and it's like kind of fucked up. But
what is it with the thing with dogs though? Does that bother people because dogs really have no agency? It's like there's a complete innocence, especially not only to animals, but to a dog. Is that really what that is?
I think so. I think it's that, like, they're man's best friend, and they are innocent, and we find them endearing and cute and funny, and we know they're kind of helpless, and they don't really know, even though they're kind of in an attack mode in this specific situation in The Last of Us Part 2. It's there's something sad about it. No one wants to see that. No one wants to see a dog get hurt. It's funny because when I think about what happened with Michael Vick, like 20 years ago or so, and
big thing here. Right.
And he was on the Falcons at the time, and the whole thing went down with dog fighting. And I must admit, because I wasn't really a dog person at the time, my friends had dogs growing up, so I had no problem with dogs. And you know, they're cute. I have relationships of pet them and walk them sometimes with my friends or whatever, but I understood why that's a big deal. It's like, that's disgusting. It's a horrible thing, but like it hit me in a different way years later when I realized what I would have felt like if I had known then about dogs, that what I know about them now. Yeah. So
what was his role in the whole thing as it came out? Like as the whole thing played out and we got the whole picture, what was Michael Vick's role in that?
I think like it was on his property, and he was, I think, some of the money and like facilitation of it, but basically knew it was happening and then lied about it too. And it's pretty insane that he went to prison, like did multiple years in prison, came back and had a career and actually figured, like, he definitely left a lot of money on the table, and his reputation is permanently ruined or whatever. But he is one of those rare cases of doing something pretty heinous and then getting some of it back.
He got a reprieve almost.
Right. Like Mike Vick was in prison. It's just kind of interesting. And I remember when he came back, and then he played for the Eagles.
Right.
And he was on the Jets.
Yeah. And there were a lot of Vick's jerseys in emerald green, believe me. You know,
yeah, people like forgot about it's funny, like that kind of missed me at a certain point where I think I would have responded to it a lot differently. I think at that point,
as somebody now who
loves, who really loves, loves and appreciates dogs. It does hit a little bit different.
No, I get that for 100%.
Wanted to call out a couple of interesting scenes that I thought, what do you think about the fake shark fin scene? That's like a famous scene. In some way, that might arguably be the most, do you think maybe the most famous scene from the movie actually is like the idea of someone, like that's spoofed a lot, that whole idea, like even sometimes tacitly or passively, where it's like they're getting in trouble and they get taken out of the water or whatever. It's very cute. But I love that scene, and this movie does a good job of foreboding and like not following through to raise tension so that when the tension is broken, it really matters. So there's that great example of the two guys on the dock trying to catch the shark and getting teared in, and you expect that this guy is going to get eaten, but they don't.
No.
Which is so interesting. And then there's another moment like this, this is before that happened, where there's like this tense moment, everyone's running out, and there's the shark fin and whatever, and then it's just not. That must have been so interesting if you didn't know that was going to happen, or didn't know, because I don't remember the movie beat for beat, but when that was all happening, I'm like, oh yeah, this is when the fake shark fin thing comes in. But if you didn't have any context for that must have been a pretty powerful scene. And I think that's a really cool, memorable scene from film, in my opinion.
You fooled a lot of people with that in the theaters in 1975.
Definitely.
For sure. Very Spielbergian. And you know what? I mean, that whole shark fin gag, don't quote me on this, but I feel like that's something that started in comic strips and cartoons. Like think of old Warner, old Fleischer cartoons or old Warner Brothers Bugs Bunnies. I don't know that gag had ever been done in live action, whether it was TV or film, like let's say a show like Flipper that took place in the water and was, centered on the dolphin character. But I love having that in here because it is a misdirect for the audience. Again, very Spielbergian, definitely taking a page from Hitchcock. And that whole thing, I love the way it all plays out and culminates to the kids kind of popping up and revealing themselves to the butts of millions of Coast Guard guns pointing at them. It's very, the way it's shot, the way, that payoff feels a lot like everything we're going to get from Spielberg. Here's my question though. Why did that shark fin need 2 kids? Why was that a 2-man job? That's weird. I'm not sure why they needed to have, was one kind of the navigator, like swim this way, and the other one was just holding onto the fin.
Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah,
it's kind of funny. It'd be scary if it was one kid that almost got his head blown off.
And Navy SEAL regalia. It's like, Jesus, what are you guys wearing? Like, Christ. Yeah, I dig that.
I love the inhale, exhale of some moments that pay off with a death and some moments that pay off as a complete oh shit, that was a close one.
Yeah, it's actually somewhat unpredictable. I mean, if you watch it in ignorance,
there's a rhythm.
Yeah,
there's a real rhythm with that.
Yeah.
Where you don't know what to expect after a while. It's good. It's a young filmmaker trying to be Hitchcock, not quite there yet, but you could see the makings of, something that'll be, somebody will go on to be a genius for sure.
And what about the John Williams soundtrack? The score is pretty awesome. And pre-Star Wars John Williams, still famous at this point, but not as famous as he would become. It's so interesting. It's brilliant. Where do you come up with that stuff? So interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting.
You would know better than me.
Yeah.
Musically. It's the simplicity of this one though. You know what I mean? It's just the sheer simplicity, how brilliant it is, and how, John Williams was pretty young. He wasn't the storied John Williams that we would know, doing scoring everything for Spielberg and Lucas, ad infinitum. He was still young, to do something that simple and be confident in it and it be so effective. Pretty interesting. Again, somebody with no musical pedigree or knowledge, but just the fact of leaning on something so simple that's that strong. When's the last time you went into the ocean without thinking of Jaws or that soundtrack? It's just become the background of our lives. It's ingrained. You can't think of Jaws without thinking of that music, right? It's it's one for one.
Yeah, I'm looking at his work, John Williams' discography. First of all, his first wife died the year this came out, or the year before this came out, which is interesting.
Oh, wow.
So he was writing maybe from that point of view as well.
Holy shit.
God, dude, he's done so many things. Because it's all these concertos and stuff too. It's mostly other things. It's not even a lot of soundtracks or scores.
It would have been a great one for our game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he's alive.
I know. Still going, still kicking, baby.
Yeah, very interesting, very iconic, and was active beginning in the early 50s. So
he was going for a while. Was he really?
It says 1952 to present.
So he was 20 years in. Holy shit. I don't know if I realized that.
It says 54 to 73 on Wikipedia, rise to prominence. And then and 74 to present, collaborations with Steven Spielberg, huge one, and then Star Wars, and so on and so forth.
So those are the ones that really put him on the map, but he was already around a while.
Yeah, that makes sense of how he kind of ended up with Lucas, I guess. I didn't really ever make that connection.
Sure.
But yeah, it's interesting. His first wife, Barbara Ruick, was an actress, and she died at the age of 41 of an aneurysm.
Wow.
Brain aneurysm.
Oof, that's young.
In
wow.
1974. And then he remarried in 1980, and she's still alive to this day, apparently, his new wife.
Okay.
If you marry, if your wife dies or your husband dies and you marry again, what's that all about from the other perspective? You kind of are inherently second fiddle, are you, right? Presumably, if the person didn't die, this would have never happened. It's kind of an act of God.
Interesting question.
That's a lot to deal with, probably. You would have to be a special kind of person, I think, to deal with that without any feelings.
Yeah, to be on the other side of that. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's a tricky one. That's a really tricky one. Probably not for everybody, or probably take, I don't know, maybe there's a lot of conviction in it. Like when you meet that second one and a romance is kindled after a tragedy like that, maybe that's sign enough. You know, it's like, wow, I could see myself being with this person, even in light of everything tragic that happened. You know, oof, yeah, that's a toughie, man. Yeah, but the fact that he's still married to the second wife is that's a testament to that can work.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
And then I was going to ask you about a few other things. The first I wanted to ask you about was, did you see the Sega Killer Shark machine?
Oh, dude.
What do you think of that? Nice early piece of Sega hardware.
I'm not even sure I was always aware that arcade games like that, you know, outside of pinball and the early, you know, fortune telling things and everything sort of existed. Like mid 70s arcade is a blind spot for me.
Those are like those are mechanical games still at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, like it said that Killer Shark game has some sort of internal sort of carousel mechanism that projects the shark onto the screen and then had a built-in 8-track player for the audio. I was like, wow, that is a fascinating era of arcade that again is a gap for me. But that ushered in everything, you know, the Space Invaders and the Donkey Kongs only a few years prior. But I love that it's Sega. I love that it's not even the Sega the blue Sega logo. It's like an earlier Sega logo in red. Still in Japan. And I think that game came out in 72 in Japan and had just come out in North America in 75. So that was brand new in the States. That whole game.
I wonder if there was a sponsor. I wonder if there was a sponsorship. And I always think about, I overestimated when I was a kid, like how much brand inclusion is circumstantial in things. Well, I guess what I'm saying is I didn't realize when I was younger, and I've realized it more and more, that like when you see a brand in something, it's very intentional. And even just like, a computer or something like that or whatever, it's like there's always a reason for it. And I wonder if maybe that's an example of Sega putting a little early money into things. Cause I did notice some other brands. I was curious if you noticed too. Coke obviously had a huge presence in this movie. And I noticed someone drinking Fanta at some point. There's a Tab can in one of the shots, which is dope.
Oh my God.
So Heinz is in there. There's a scene where he's sniffing like Old Spice, or doing something with Old Spice
with the chum, and he's doing this Old Spice in the rag, so he could
And then Narragansett beer, which I don't know and I've never heard of, but is real, and that's drank with great volume in the movie. Did you notice anything interesting like that with any of the?
Is that what Quentin had on the boat?
Yeah, Narragansett beer. I looked it up. Yeah,
so that was real.
Yeah, it's real.
Wow. I didn't know about that. No, I was smitten by the arcade because there was a whole gallery of machines. We get a good look at the, you know, it kind of zooms on the Sega Killer Shark thing, which is obviously relevant to the film, and then kind of pans away from that shot, very Spielbergian. But I wanted to see the rest of that stuff because, again, that's an era where I was way too young. I mean, I was a year old to be paying attention, but I love that sort of fledgling arcade era of these mechanical games coming in before they were largely, you know, electronic the way we would know them. So that Killer Shark game, I had to research it because I was just like, wow, dude, like there was an era of arcade. I always think from my naivete, like it went from pinball straight to arcade, and that wasn't the case. There was that brief period where these games were coming in, ushering in the arcade era with these really primitive machines.
Yeah, there's missing link machines because if this was made in 72 in Japan, that's like pre-microprocessor. Like these things really couldn't work yet the way that we understood them by the late 70s. So it's very interesting to think about that because I don't know much about the pinball era, and I don't know. There's like a bunch of overlapping eras. Like there's like people were playing. I don't know how much you know about this. Like people in universities were playing like a Star Trek game on supercomputers in like the 60s. And there were like these space fighting games on like punch cards and shit that people used to play, like these very bespoke, weird, inaccessible games. And then, so that has like that layer of influence almost goes into like D&D, like this parallel course. And then this level of influence from pinball, I think, goes into the electromechanical games that then become your early like Taito, Bandai, or it would be just Namco at the time, that kind of stuff. That, you know, Capcom, Sega, everyone's Nintendo.
Fascinating, dude. That's fascinating. Because you know why I'm particularly smitten with it? Because it's early nerd culture, and it's sort of the forefathers of nerd culture in a lot of ways. Like I think when was the earliest comic book shop? Strictly comic book shop. We were born. I was born into that world where that already existed. So I don't know what the answer is, but that's the sort of the same thing. It's like the early D&D, tabletop and computer, that sort of thing with early computer games. And the whole thing with pinball and comic books and early arcade where these mechanical machines, it's fascinating from, a pop culture / nerd culture perspective. But it's also fascinating in that those machines had to be pricey because they weren't one for one. They were all unique. They all had unique mechanisms. They ran a different way. They had to be very expensive to fix. They had to be very expensive to operate, right? The earliest things, like there were really no experts at it yet, right? That's really fascinating. I would love to dig down. It's kind of, honestly, until I see something like this, it's something that it's a complete blind spot. Like I didn't even know that really existed. So there was like a 3 or 4 year period where it was before Taito and Nintendo and everybody came over with the microprocessors.
Right, because there was
this whole thing.
The first video game was made on Long Island at Brookhaven National Laboratory on an oscilloscope, and the game doesn't exist anymore. I forget what they called it. I'm getting confused because Space War, I think, was the first like mega computer game, which were basically just doing dice rolls. And like, I think the Star Trek game was this like computational game to keep track of like axes in space or whatever by using the computer. It's very,
cool.
it's really good shit. So there were a lot of people that were thinking about this at that time. And yeah, it is interesting to think about who would be the first or amongst the first like nerd culture progenitors that were like, yeah, this is where you buy your Superman comics and your detective comics and whatever. Or was it just newsstands for many and bookstores and stuff for many years until.
Yeah. Spinner racks at the drugstore.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer to that is. That would be interesting. Yeah. Cause I was certainly born into that world and you were obviously too. So you were molded by it. All right. Let's see here. Did you notice a lot of accidental shots in the movie? I noticed things that weren't supposed to happen, but they kept that. A couple examples would be when he's going to get the paintbrush in the hardware store and he knocks the paintbrushes over. That seemed to be an accident, like a real accident. There are a couple shots where he hits his head on a sign, and those seem to be authentic accidents too. And then there are really cool shots that are actually quite impressive that are very technical, like the ferry shot where they're just on the ferry. They all walk on the ferry. It's all this one shot of the ferry moving and they're all talking. It's a good shit. So it seems like a hodgepodge of finely made and crafted scenes and then things they kind of just kept as they went. What do you think?
Yeah, man, those are great call outs. This is a very ambitiously shot movie. You could see that it's a young filmmaker really trying to be dynamic with the camera, definitely working off a storyboard where they're cutting in and cutting out and going wide and trying to shoot at dramatic angles. There's a lot of that. You could see a lot of like hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, early filmmaker hungry, that type of thing. And it's a lot of it's really good. And then there's like those sort of amateurish mistakes, a lot of continuity errors. You got Chief Brody, he's going for his pack of cigarettes. And then the next shot, it's a little wider, but his arms are already down.
Oh, I don't even think I looked at any of the IMDb stuff or noticed any of that stuff. That's interesting. I should read
just hookups, this continuity error that are jarring. It's like, wow, that, something went wrong there in editing or they didn't have any coverage, that type of thing. And then there's a couple of really weird things. Like there's one shot where Brody is trying to reason with Quint. I think they're on the boat at that point. And he's like, why don't we call for help or something? And it basically fades over him talking and cuts to a time lapse of the next shot. I don't know if you noticed that.
That's interesting.
It's really sloppy, like something that went wrong in editing that they just had to keep in because they were under the gun. I'm not sure. But there's a couple of really weird things like that where you're like, can you imagine 20 years later that making it into a Spielberg cut? Like this is before Spielberg had Final Cut. You know what I mean? Like it's an era, like as a film fan where I'm like, and I know what he's dealing with. Like he was a young filmmaker. He bit off way more than he can chew. He was way over schedule. He was way over budget. When he would leave the Northeast to go home to LA, to Hollywood, he would go to dinner parties And they were all like counting him for dead. They were all like, "You're fucking finished," and then he would go back and try to work on the movie. He was, and then, this was his claim to fame ultimately. It's so interesting. And this was probably the movie. I mean, not even Raiders, not even E.T. or Close Encounters, anything he would do. After Jaws, he was the bankable director. He was the one to go to, and he was in his 20s, I think, 27 when he shot Jaws, I want to say. Dude, that's intimidating that you could have that sort of, not only that kind of creativity and that courage, but the moxie, you know what I mean? And also just kind of just a raw talent,
I dig how he was very committed, it seemed, to being on location. Not only with the beach shots and stuff, you obviously can't do like West Coast beaches and stuff and make it look real. It's not going to look real at all, or Southeast beaches or whatever, but just being in the ocean, on the ocean, filming underwater in the ocean and all that. Like, it really could have been easier if they just did it in tanks or in lakes or something, which I know was
on a soundstage.
Right. And I wonder, it's not like Titanic where they finally had the tools to, James Cameron had the tools to make it look really realistic on a soundstage, and they spent a ton of money and fucking crazy amount of leverage or whatever. They would have never been able to do that with Jaws. So it probably would have looked really small. And that would have, I think, they're just little decisions like that were very difficult, but seem to have really benefited the film and its realistic feel. So I give him a shout out.
Can
I
you imagine, Kyle?
Yeah.
I mean, just being a young director in your 20s, right? Hollywood's already many decades old. A lot of great directors, a lot of great film studios, a lot of movie stars, a lot of big budgets, a lot of movies about the ocean that almost none of them were actually filmed on the ocean for a reason. Now here comes this young director. He's done one made-for-TV movie, a couple of scripts maybe. And he's like, I'm going to film this movie on the ocean. It's like, what the fuck? Everybody's, what the fuck? That's not how you do it. It's completely, you're messing with, something that's completely unpredictable, when it comes to storms, when it comes to weather, the nature of the ocean, creatures, the fact that it's extremely dangerous, and he did it. It almost killed him and everyone around him, but he did do it. And you know why it works, dude? It's so important, especially the second half of the movie where they're out on the boat, again, to kind of leverage how horrific the ocean is and to see that they're isolated. There's nothing around for dozens and dozens of miles, and that no matter where you look in a 360-degree rotation, there's no land. They're out in the middle of the ocean for all intents and purposes, at least the way it's filmed. That's got to look like that. And you feel that isolation, you feel that sense of danger, and you feel that dread of like, they're out there beyond help, beyond hope. Even the radio gets smashed. It's like, it's these guys against this beast, these guys against the elements. And you really feel that. I don't know if it would have worked that way for the atmosphere if it was done even on the greatest soundstage. There was no digital. It was all practical. This was an era where the digital thing wasn't even an option, and they spent a lot of money, and they, and made a lot of effort. And they went weeks over budget and over schedule and everything like that. But yeah, man, I think it's kind of one of a kind, especially in that era, to do something that bold. But it works because of it. Yeah,
it's one of those happy accidents. I wonder how many times it went the other direction with productions, where your stubbornness leads to the complete destruction of the project. Because it must be pretty difficult to go to your benefactors and be like, I need several million more dollars, especially in the 70s, and sure, they just have to kind of give it to you. I'm sure they were fucking amped up though when it came out. And they just made so hand over fist money. I mean, Jaws itself probably made many people just permanently rich, and that's great. It's a fun genre. One of the things I really liked about it too is it's not too short, and it's at 2 hours. It's pretty perfect. There are, like we said, weird jumps and leaps of logic. I think even when they're on the water, there's a scene where they seem to be dealing with something at night, and then suddenly it's like in the middle of the day. It's like, so it's like not morning or dawn or something. It's like, this is like 3 p.m. What it looks like. It's very strange the way they stitch everything together. But I think that it's it was a fun experience to view it again, dig the characters, small cast of characters, so you get to kind of know everyone a little bit better. It was sad to see Quint die at the end, but I think he wanted to die at the end anyway. He obviously had a crazy death wish, and that shark taking 3 barrels with it underwater. I can't take 3 barrels, not 3. So anything left to say, Dig, about Jaws?
No, I like what you said about Quint. I think, aside from him arguing about he needed that 10 grand, I think there was a certain part after they got out there that he knew that was the end for him. Like it was the man versus beast, Ahab versus Moby Dick. I'm not coming back. I'm smashing the radio. I'm blowing out my own engine. You have the shark ramming the boat, destroying the boat, but he was also subsequently, sort of blowing up his own boat as well. Mm-hmm. He knew he wasn't coming back. The sort of insidious part of that is he was essentially killing the other two.
Right, exactly. Too. And they were kind of on board for it. I mean, they have to kind of be, lucid and act in that moment. You can't really be too hung up on the fact that you're probably going to die, I guess, in that moment, or maybe you would be. But yeah, I thought the same thing. It's like, damn, dude, what the fuck is this all about? It's so strange that you're just on the suicide mission with other people.
Yeah.
But it all worked out.
He was bringing them down. He was bringing them down too. There was no reason to think those two guys would live. It was sad to see Quint go. But the only other thing is, dude, that scene, I still think one of the great scenes in film, that whole sequence when they're on the boat, all 3 dudes, they're by themselves. They have, especially Hooper and Quint, have this kind of antagonistic relationship. Right? They're both men of the sea, but they don't see eye to eye, and they're challenging each other, and it's adversarial. And then everything kind of culminates in the dudes drunkenly comparing scars, and there's a thawing. They're becoming friendly. There's a humor. It's very jovial. And then it just very slowly leads into this compelling scene with serious gravity where it's like, well, what was that? He's like, that's a tattoo that I, got removed. And this whole Indianapolis story, that not only is it a great sort of soliloquy by a great character actor, but it's also like this scene that explains this character's whole bent. It explains his whole worldview and his whole thing on why he's the shark hunter. It's his whole origin.
I believe this was John Milius's contribution, or one of them.
I think you're right. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or at least he came in and polished it up, or gave it its final version or whatever. But dude, it's so good. It's such a great scene, and it's such a horrifying story that that it has to be somewhat biographical. Like, this has to have happened to men, where their boats, their battleships or their cruisers were torpedoed. They're left for dead in the middle of the ocean, especially in this case where it was a secret mission and they were all but not even acknowledged. Like, no one was supposed to know it was happening because they were delivering the atom bomb. So it's one of the great sort of pieces of film for me, and also the way it starts off with one tone and ends this whole other where it's like, it's upbeat and they're finally becoming pals. And then all of a sudden it ends up in this horrifying story. It's a great sort of arc emotionally.
It ends kind of suddenly, I think.
Yeah, you're right. It does. Yeah. For sure. And then the whole thing of like, then it's like, whoa, is this guy like, was this the ringleader shark from the past coming to finish the job?
Wow, I didn't even think of that. I would love to think that was, I would love to think that was canon in the whole story. That would be so funny to me. What about, we didn't talk about it at all, but what did you think of the special effects, like the practical shark effects? I thought they were pretty convincing.
They didn't really bother me. I mean, I know all the making of, I've seen documentaries. I know this thing never worked. Like 3/4 of the time they couldn't get this thing to do what it needed to do. But I think because of the practical effects and because of trying to make a fake shark look real, especially so many years ago, you're talking 5 decades ago, that I think it paid off, that you only get to see it in dribs and drabs, and the rest of it is seeing the fin or knowing it's down there, or seeing the barrels in the water, or seeing it drag something under, or hinting that it's there with rippling water. I like that you don't see it a lot, because I think they were trying to, that's where the money was being blown. They were trying to get this thing to operate, this mechanical shark underwater, and they just couldn't. So where you see it was, I thought it was okay. It holds up. It holds up okay, knowing its practical effects, and it's not, what do we have now? Like the Meg and all that kind of shit, like giant kaiju shark, Jason Statham, like, it's like, this is a specific era where it was more about the tension. It was more about the build-up. It was more about not seeing it. You know what I mean? It was more about not seeing it. And that was that whole Hitchcockian philosophy that, that'll never die because that's just classic filmmaking,
Agreed. All right, Dave, let's leave it there. That's Jaws. I rented it on Amazon. You can rent it on Amazon. I think it's also available on, I want to say Apple, if you want to rent it there or something, and maybe Disney or something. I don't know, something like that. But
it's Universal, right? I thought it would be on Peacock, but it's not.
Yeah, I don't know like what these older holdings before.
Yeah,
like I think a lot of the stuff that pre-merger with all these different companies, I think there's just like different rights having to do with all of them. But I'm sure they'll consolidate all of them eventually, as they always do. So, Dig, let's end this episode as we always do. Every episode of Knockback with a dad joke.
All right, my friend, I got the dad joke cards here. Got to see which ones we haven't done yet. I don't know. We've been using these for a while, so that's a good one. But I don't know if we use it. I'll keep that as a backup. Let's see. All right, this one. I don't know. This is a long journey to get to the end of this one. We'll see if you like it.
Okay,
Kyle. I've been bored recently, so I decided to take up fencing. The neighbors keep demanding that I put it back. That's a bad one.
That's pretty bad, but it's good. It's also good.
It's all right.
Yeah, I don't mind that one. All right, very well.
All right.
Well, Dig, thanks for your time today. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Appreciate you taking the time to talk about Jaws with me. I think we'll probably do one more smaller one, then we'll get back to games, I think, after that. And I know people enjoy it.
Kyle, let me pitch you something.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I meant to mention this earlier, but what do you think of this? Yeah. And you guys could DM me out there if you have thoughts on this as well.
Yeah.
Slide into the DMs, my friends. Kyle, what do you think about doing now? I know it's horrifying for both of us to think of doing even more podcasts. What do you think about this idea? Knockback After Dark. Right? What we do with Knockback After Dark is we cover the things that wouldn't be covered under a normal episode of Knockback, like we do, like, think of it like the B movie version of Knockback. Like the next, as the complement to the Jaws episode, we do a Knockback After Dark where we do the subsequent sequel Jaws movies that everybody knows aren't very good.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea at all. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Little Knockback After Dark, little B movie, shitty. I know that, we talk about Red Letter Media a lot. Those are our big brothers, and they do best of the worst. So think of it like a best of the worst. But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be, it could be a review show, just like we talked about Jaws, we talked about the other 3 films, or it could be just us letting the movie go, and now we riff over the movie, right? Maybe we watch it once through to kind of put together some sort of loose battle plan, but then we just watch the movie and we just talk shit.
Yeah, I don't mind the idea at all. We have to figure out the rights issues, and I don't know exactly how fair use works with, like, they obviously know how it works. I think it's probably also different production companies, different houses that own these different items, I think treat their shit a little differently too. So we would have to look into that, but I don't mind any idea to change things up. I have no problem with that at all. So we'll keep it in our tab. Yeah. Let Dagan know if that's something you're interested in. I wouldn't mind seeing the other movies just because I'm curious. I'm actually curious about them now. Yeah.
Some of the actors came back. Some of them didn't. Some of them are gone already. Obviously Spielberg's not attached to any of them as far as I know, but yeah, it's interesting. Right, because we never get to talk about that kind of stuff. Some of that stuff is very direct to video, so some of it would be hard for us to get through.
Totally, but that part of that's the fun too. But yeah, showing it to people I think would be important. Yeah, we'd have to figure that out. Knockback could very easily adapt into a video show that would be more like that, which would be cool. But we would need to get an editor, and we need to just figure out how that would work without getting demonetized and all of that and getting in trouble.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, my friend. Well, I appreciate you. I'll see you next time, Dave. See you all next time for more Knockback. Appreciate your support over on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, laststandmedia.store for merch. Until next time, goodbye. Knockback, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. Knockback's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Knockback, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.